Welcome to 10,000 Miles. Tonight's guest is Marc Ribler. Marc's an amazing musician, producer, songwriter, musical director. He's done a lot of really great things. He's currently the musical director for Stevie Van Zandt, The Disciples of Soul. He's done a million things. He's still an active, engaged musician and just lives and breathes music. Oddly enough, I've known Marc since my days in Jackson, New Jersey in the late 70s. He lived around the corner from me. And he was one of the guitar players that I idolized growing up. Really talented, very musical guy. I'm eager for all of you to learn more about Marc. So let's dive in. Hey folks, thanks for tuning into the show. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, the Podcast Index, and Podcasting 2.0. We'd really appreciate if you download Fountain, find us there, and support us via Value for Value. We hope you enjoy the show. Happy listening. Hey Marc, how you doing? Welcome to the show today.
Great to see you, Vic. Yeah, man, I'm so happy to be here, brother.
My gosh, it's been such a long time since we've actually had a conversation face to face. I've been super excited once we got this scheduled, and I super appreciate your flexibility. I know you got a busy schedule, but I've been looking forward to today for a long time. So thank you. Thank you again for coming on.
You got it, brother. I don't even want to think about how many years it's been since I've seen you, man.
It's been a bit.
Yeah.
It's been a bit. Hey, the audience doesn't have the benefit I have when that's, we grew up around the corner from each other, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And they haven't been following your career and your life like I have been. So why don't you take a minute and tell everybody who Marc Ribler is, what you're doing now?
Marc Ribler is a producer, guitar player, singer-songwriter who's been in the music business his entire life, which is only several years more than I know you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been fortunate enough to have, my entire life I've done what I love, which is music, and I've done it with people I care about, and a lot of dreams have come true, and still striving for other dreams. But I've been in the business, my entire life, and I must say, I never had a plan B. So fortunately, plan A worked out.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, man. And, go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, my dad asked me, I had a little run in the music business myself. And my dad asked me once, what's your plan B? And I said, success.
Yeah.
Turned out I had a plan B, but I didn't know it at the time. No matter what you do, you got to stay focused on it. Marc, let's go back to when you first got the bug of music.
Yes.
Tell me what happened. Your first guitar, your first instrument. When did you get bitten by the bug?
I got bitten by the bug at the tender age of 11. So my journey was, I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York, in the Sheepshead, in the Nostrand projects. I'm going to turn my email off because it keeps...
yeah, no worries.
Binging. Yeah, I want to stop the binging.
It's all live and beautiful.
So, growing up, all my friends were Black and Jewish and Puerto Rican and Italian and Irish. So, and I grew up, fortunately, in a very liberal family. So I never knew from prejudice. I never knew from bigotry. And my parents accepted my Black friends and my white friends in the house just the same. There was never any differentiation or any finger pointed that this person is different.
Yeah.
Then at 9 years old, I moved to Jackson, New Jersey, which was a mind fuck, to go from basically, the full spectrum of humanity to mostly white people. And if you are Black, it seemed like everyone made the black person aware that he wasn't white, and
Oh
the
man.
Jewish person aware that they weren't Catholic, Christian, or it was very, it was tremendous culture shock. And I immediately I just wanted to move back to Brooklyn immediately. So we would go, I had a cousin that lived in the neighborhood where I grew up in Brooklyn, and we would go back and forth, every month or so we'd go visit my grandparents and cousins. And I guess I was really praying for, at that young age, I didn't realize what it was, but I was praying for some sort of sanctuary and salvation from this culture shock that I was experiencing. So anyway, a couple years later, I'm 11 years old. We go visit my cousin, he was a couple years older, my cousin Stephen. I looked up to Stephen. And in his room, in the corner of the room, was this guitar that his parents rented him a guitar, and he was taking guitar lessons. And I asked him about it, and I left their house that day thinking, I got to get a guitar. That was, it was like, I didn't realize it, but that was the Holy Grail standing in the corner of his room.
Yeah.
It was my Holy Grail, So, we went home. I don't know if it was the next day. I asked my parents if I could get a guitar, and they got me a guitar. And I would say that moment, that period in time, probably saved my life. I mean, I don't know
Wow.
what I would have done if I didn't find that something to channel all that, the emotion and my sort of unhappiness with where life was going. And then I had an outlet. I had a place to put that energy, and
Wow,
I
that's
never looked back.
amazing. I
Yeah.
tell you what, I tell people all the time on the show, and every time I have a guest on, it's almost unfair. Like, I invite people I know and like, and have either had a long relationship or had a relationship in the past or known for a very long time, or somehow have just met them and we've clicked, like, kindred spirit. And more times than not, as these conversations unfold, no matter how long you know somebody, no matter how well you know them, no matter how many conversations you might or might not have had in the past, I'm always finding even more similarities between the people I'm talking to. This is why I love doing this, by the way. I mean,
Oh,
this is gold. So I grew up in Brooklyn, and Mark, I would tell the exact same story to everybody, the exact one. I grew up in a 64 family apartment building in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in Flatbush. Across the street was another 64 family apartment building. Down the street was 100 family apartment building. Then there were what was called the private homes,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
2-story, 3-story, 1 family, 2 family, whatever. We had it all in 4 blocks.
Yeah.
Christians, Jews, Muslims, people from every country you could possibly knew about, white, black, Hispanic. I mean, it was crazy. So, and my father's Roman Catholic, my mother's from England, my grandparents are from Europe, they're Jews. It's like, yeah, we busted each other's balls, but nobody hated each other. Like, there wasn't this craziness. Like, that was normal for me. And
Yeah.
just in the building that I lived in, everybody was represented.
Yeah, man.
So moving to Jackson when I was in 8th grade, what does that make me? 12, 13, something like that?
Yeah.
Diversity left me. But you know what didn't leave me, Mark? My sense of everybody's the same, because that's how my parents raised me. That's how I grew up. That's who I was around.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy. So to hear, I didn't know you went through that, man. But
Yeah,
additionally,
man.
much like you, I had a cousin who played guitar.
Yeah.
And that's how I got introduced to playing guitar. So I just wanted to get it out there again. There's no coincidences why we're having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
We've got even more in common than I ever knew, but please going. So you get that moment, you see that guitar in the corner, you went and got your first guitar. What was it? Do you remember?
It was a rental guitar. It was a Segovia. It was a Segovia classical guitar. We
Nice.
got from AJ Music Center on Route 9 in Howell, New Jersey.
I remember it.
I think with the guitar rental came like 3 guitar lessons or something. And so I went to the music store, and I don't know what I did or didn't learn from the guy, but it was all part of this, this welcome mat into, this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. little did
Yeah.
I know, you know.
Yeah.
So then, you know, my parents saw that I was serious about I would play every day, and then they bought me a Giannini acoustic guitar. I've never seen these guitars since, but they had these cheapo brand guitars at this place.
Okay.
So then that was the first acoustic guitar that I owned, was the Giannini. And then as a birthday present, and I had a paper out. I saved some money, and my dad gave me the rest of the money. And when I was just before I was 13, I got a 1974 Gibson Les Paul Deluxe Cherry Sunburst
Ugh,
from King
amazing.
James Music on Flatbush Avenue
Oh, really?
in Brooklyn.
Wait,
Yeah.
King James. I don't know if I used to go there or not. I forget.
It was not far from King's Plaza, you know, on
Yeah.
Flatbush Avenue.
Yeah. I didn't go to that one, but
The,
I'm familiar with it.
obviously, the popular music store in Brooklyn was Sam Ash near King's Highway.
Yep. Yep. That was 3 blocks from where I lived.
See, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was like Midwood. Then you lived like in Midwood area.
I lived in Flatbush.
Flatbush, okay.
Yeah, I lived in Flatbush.
So so I got this Les Paul, and I got an amplifier. And by the way, that Les Paul was $340 new. And that,
Amazing.
You know, I mean, now they're, you know, any Les Paul worth its salt is at least
Add a zero.
Yeah, add another
Yeah.
zero. Exactly.
Add a zero.
And that was sort of, and then I ventured, you know, into, at that point I was really listening to, you know, a lot of like Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and Johnny Winter. And I was really finding out that there was this vast spectrum of people that became my guitar heroes, you know, and I would spend all day in my room with vinyl records. And if I couldn't figure out the licks at normal speed, I would put the turntable on half speed, and it was the same. It was the same pitch, an octave lower. It was the same note, an octave lower. So it would be at half speed, so you'd be able to hear the subtleties that made these riffs happen. You know, and then you would absorb them in your cells. You know, you would because you would do this day in and day out. Like today, I see all these kids on Instagram and these amazing, like these kids that are playing stuff that, you know, took us, you know, so many years to accomplish, you know, these, this, you know, trickery and mastery. And you realize that nowadays it's like, all you got to do is go on YouTube, and there's going to be some guy that's going to show you how that's done. A guy, maybe he's 40 or 50 or 60 years old. He's been playing it. But when we were kids, we had to, necessity is the mother of invention. We had to figure out. And if you love the guitar player, like I love the Allman Brothers, so you know, Dickie Betts would be on Don Kirshner's rock concert. So I would get the opportunity to see Dickie Betts play that lick that I couldn't figure out, and I was praying the camera would go onto his hands for 5 seconds to show, you know, whatever it was, you know. Whatever
the access to information is unbelievable. You are familiar with a young guy? I think he's in his early 20s, Matteo Mancuso.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
dude, holy cow!
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's the reinvention of guitar playing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen a lot of guys, Mark. I mean, from Beck. I mean, to me, the fact that he passed before I got to see him. I mean, Beck was just, I could cry thinking about Jeff Beck. I mean, that guy just made me feel something when he played that was just incredible. But, you know, all the greats growing up, and then Van Halen and all these shredders that came out. But this guy, Matteo Mancuso, to me, like that was almost the reinvention of guitar playing. This guy, what he's doing with his right hand this way and this way.
Yeah.
And the articulation and the speed is, not only is he technically amazing.
Yeah.
The guy is musical. He's tasty. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, like, if you would have heard that, to your point, without seeing it, what would you have done to figure out how he was doing that?
Your mind would explode. Well, that happened, you know, I mean, certainly, you know, Jimi Hendrix. So if there wasn't Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck sort of were evolving at the same rate. And I believe they both completely idolized each other.
Yeah.
Jeff Beck is another one of course, one of my favorite guitar players. So the difference is that, you know, there was there was only a few. There was a few record companies, and there were a few people that got shot. So we only became aware of, our 10
Yeah.
guitar heroes, whatever it was in the early 70s, whatever, but Jeff Beck, if you look at the arc of his career, and the guy never stopped reinventing himself,
Never.
It's such a powerful voice, because you could listen to Hendrix and Jeff Beck records at that time, and you can hear them stealing each other's shit.
Yeah.
And making it their own,
Yep.
Like literally, I was, Jimmy was so influenced by Jeff Beck, but Jeff Beck was so, Jimmy went to England, and it was like, so I'm just looking at that. That's biblical stuff.
Yeah.
Big
time.
Mancuso, what's his first name again? I'm sorry, I forgot his name.
Mateo.
So Mateo, it's like, this is like in a sea of 1,000 kids that are like, that your mind explodes. It's like, what? How the fuck did this kid learn how to play like that?
Crazy.
There was, back in those days, there was two guys,
That's it.
And Jimmy went to England, and the Beatles and Clapton, and they were all there to see Jimmy, and their heads exploded, because aside from playing like that, the performance, man, playing the guitar in,
whole other level.
Yeah. And of course, he had the opportunity of growing up on the, playing the Chitlin circuit with what's his name, Lucille.
B.B. King.
No, not B.B. King. No, Lucille. What's his name? Little Richard.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So he was able to have like someone like Little Richard's fashion sensibility, and just performance prowess, and he absorbed that like a sponge. And he was, how old? He was 24, 23 years old when he went to England,
Crazy.
Mancuso's age, anyway, so the thing is, it's like, we grew up, God bless all the new acts and all the new kids. We grew up in the heart of a renaissance that only happens every 200 years.
Yeah.
And the last one was Mozart and Beethoven and Bach. And that happened in the 60s, man. With Bob Dylan and the Beatles and the Stones and Jimi Hendrix. This is a renaissance that happened that led to, all the great music of the 60s and going into the 70s. Obviously, there's things we love from the 80s and the 90s. Grunge was sort of an important thing, which I'm sure it affected your writing career as much as it did mine.
Oh, well, that's a whole other podcast, buddy.
It's a whole other podcast, man.
Yeah.
I had 3 songs flying up a chart with this guy, Mitch Malloy, on RCA. Grunge came in, and anything that was pop rock, hair band or whatever, done. Yeah. So
it chopped me at the knees. It did, and I wasn't ready.
I remember, Hey Stupid, man. I remember when I was so proud of you, man. That you had
brother.
you got the cut with Alice, and
thank you.
Shit was happening.
When that out, I had 6 co-writes on that record.
Yeah.
And the prior record was platinum, Poison.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
right.
we actually had a call with Tommy Mottola.
Yeah.
Okay. While we were in the studio, and you know what he told us? Boys, I just heard the record. Go price the Ferraris.
Nice, man.
That's what he said.
Yeah,
I'll never forget it.
Yeah,
and it was like, Nirvana.
Exactly, man.
Yeah, it was a bummer, but a great experience nonetheless. You mentioned something about like this renaissance.
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough too, and I don't want to sound like a couple of old geezers, but it's true. I mean, this is absolutely true. We also lived through the renaissance of recording technology at its finest. Like to go from live stereo to 2-track to 4-track to 8-track. Like once we got into the 70s and Neve consoles and APEC consoles and Calrex and all these big, the multi-million-dollar 10-foot boards and the warm sound of analog and 24-track on 2-inch and then locking them together, like that's before things got thin. And what I would say is when the bottom fell out.
Yeah.
So people were still crafting songs differently than they do today.
Yeah.
The record, like for me, I love listening to 70s music, not only for the songwriting and the performances, but the sonic quality of the things that happened in the 70s blows my mind every single time. I think that was another renaissance when it comes to technology and recording. And the X7 and the polyphonic synths and all that before that came out, and the Prophet 5 and all this stuff happened, and it did digital, and I can do more shit on my computer now that I could do at the recording studio I owned.
Yeah.
And then sampling and pieces and parts, like writing's different now. Writing's completely different.
I mean, kids buy MIDI packs. They buy, it's like, I mean, we had to figure out, it's like, okay, I had to learn how to play every instrument just so if my buddy couldn't come over to play drums one day, or keyboards, it's like, I had to get shit done.
Yep.
You know, I'm producing music. It's like, I need to get this recorded so I can get a cut, so I can get a record deal.
Yep.
So, you know, like we say, necessity is the mother of invention. So it's like, I got to get this done. Then the drum machine, you know, the Linn drum, and I had an Oberheim drum machine, and then all the MIDI shit came, so you could orchestrate all these things. You could program the drums, sequence MIDI, and then you could lock it to your, to SMPTE on your analog tape recorder.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that was huge. That opens up all these sort of, even if you had an 8-track recorder, it opened up all these other, you would need to record drums on. If it was a drum set, it would be nice to have 10 tracks for drums, or
right.
So now you're getting your drum sources, a drum machine. You don't need audio tracks.
Nope.
So I think that was the beginning.
That was the beginning
of the end,
but it was useful. I mean, it was
Very
useful at the time.
Yeah,
Mark, I want to pull back more into you.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. Mark and I grew up when Mark moved to Jackson, New Jersey. What year was that?
I moved there in 1970.
Okay, so I came about 8 years later.
Okay.
And Mark and I lived around the corner. You lived on Adelphi. I lived in Columbia Court right off of Rutgers Road.
Yeah.
But I think I could have thrown a hard ball and hit the roof of your house and vice versa, because we were pretty much around the same spot of the street.
Yeah.
But dude, there were a lot of guitar players in Brookwood 3.
Bro, there was Joe Rayo, who no one knows Joe. And Zach, Jeff Wild, Zach Wild was a block away, 2 blocks from us.
Jay Miliaccio was down the street from us.
Right, man.
John Cormos was down the street from us. Right. So, but the 2 guys, like Zach aside, because Zach was much younger, but came up very, very quickly.
Yeah.
You and Rayo were the guys, right? And you were guys, like, you were in the big cover bands. I remember seeing you in Bystander.
Right.
Shit, I went up to the Meadowlands one day to check you guys out. And that was not a short haul, You're playing the racetrack, for crying out loud, right?
Yeah.
And that was freaking awesome. And, I think Joey Rayo was the first guy outside Eddie I heard play Eruption.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think I had heard anybody do that. And I was like, what are these guys doing? But so Mark I'm going to jump in, I'm going to lead in here and then I want to hear about how this got created. Mark was the first guy I knew who had his own recording studio that you had built in the basement of your parents' house back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the first place I ever recorded, was in your studio with a couple of my high school knuckleheads and Doug Bates, right, who looked like Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
How did you convince your parents to let you take over the basement? Like, what happened?
Man, my parents, who I'm looking at a picture of right now, my dad's still alive. My mom, may she rest in peace. She died a few years ago. They were just, they were so incredibly supportive. My mom wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer. She wanted me to go to college. They didn't go to college, and that was really her dream. But they realized that he's playing music. My dad realized it even before my mom. So they would encourage me to stay in school. But I dropped out of high school. There was nothing offered at Jackson High School that wanted me to stay in school. So anyway, long story short, they saw that I had this bug, and I asked them if I could build a control room in the basement, to record my music. And they said, they thought about it for a minute, and they gave me permission, and me and my friend Steve Murphy, great drummer friend.
Okay.
We basically, we built the double walls. I asked my friend Paul Prestipino, who was, Paul worked at Record Plant in New York.
Okay.
From 1969 until it closed. And Paul may rest, he just died recently. Paul
Oh man.
Prestipino he was one of my mentors. When I was 17, I joined this band Night Flyer, and they were recording the ad in the Aquarian, which was the local newspaper.
Yeah, I
There was a
remember.
musician one ad in that paper, and it said, band currently recording at Record Plant. Now, when I saw that, my eyes went, because when we were kids, you looked at the vinyl record. When you
Yeah.
opened Electric Ladyland record, the Jimi Hendrix record, it said recorded at Record Plant, New York. Or if you opened up Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic, or Johnny Winter, Still Alive and Well, these records were recorded at Record Plant. So my mind exploded. It's like, I got to get this gig. So I went.
Yeah.
These guys were quite a bit older than I was, and they were working on original music, and I went and auditioned, and I got the gig. And that weekend, we were at Record Plant, and
Amazing.
the Joe Perry project was recording in the next room, and I was like,
Oh
I
man.
mean, we
You're
were in the business, and we'd done, we were local bands and stuff. It's like all of a sudden, it's like this is the music business. There's all these, John Lennon's 10-foot guitar that he gave to Roy Acala, the owner of the Record Plant, is in this display case on the 10th floor, where Studio C is, where the API. Oh man, what's the engineer's name? The producer. He produced Aerosmith and anyway,
oh
it's like my mind's exploding. So I got this bug about recording. It was like the next phase of sort of, I
yeah.
was playing guitar, I was singing a little bit, I was getting into songwriting. I joined this original band and we're recording at the Record Plant. So then I got the studio bug. And my parents saw how, determined I was about the recording thing. So they said, okay, just be careful, don't cut your fingers off with saws,
Yeah.
and
Don't
we built
clip
the
any
control room.
wires down there. Yeah.
Exactly, man.
It
And then
was
maybe a
great.
year later, you came over with Doug, and I remember we were recording those. I think, was it original songs and covers, or?
Yeah, it was 4 songs.
Yeah.
The original song was called Making It Through the Night. It's funny. I took a shower before the show night. I was singing it in the shower. I haven't sung it in 30 years,
Oh man, bro, you gotta send me the demo. I'd love to hear it,
I
man.
don't
If you
know
have
that
it.
I have it. I got to see if I think my brother's got it actually. I think my
Yeah,
brother's had it on a cassette.
I'd love to
Um,
hear it.
I got to call mom. I was hysterical. But what'd you have? You had a reel-to-reel 8-track back then, right? TAC?
Yeah, I had I think it was probably Tascam 80-8,
Okay.
because
Oh,
that was
that
in the
makes
early
sense.
80s, right? What was that, like 1981 or something?
Yeah, it was before I
Um,
graduated high school.
Yeah, I had a Soundcraft mixer and a Tascam 80-8 half-inch 8-track. And yeah, man, we were making records in the basement.
It was
I mean,
unbelievable. So
yeah,
cool.
yeah, man.
So you then, all right. So now, when do you get out of the basement? Like, what happens from there?
Well, I really, I just kind of learned. I always had an affinity, or even like maybe a gift to understand um, how things should sound, and somehow having because we come here with certain, you know, everyone comes here with certain advantages and disadvantages, or gifts and things they need to learn, or so for whatever reason I had like certain sonic gifts, and I would attract people like Joe Rayo, who were
Okay.
also kind of extraordinary with sound and trying to develop like amplifiers and doing guitar modifications. And so I was just like, when I would go to Record Plant, I was a sponge. I sat there and watched, like Rod O'Brien. Like I'd watch these engineers, like a hawk. Like if they were turning a dial, not that I would ask them and be a bug about everything, but I'd say, oh, I hear how it's brightening up, how this is brightening it up, and what compression is doing. And on one song we were mixing, the snare drum was a little bit anemic; it was a little thin sounding. So the guy he put took a line out from the snare, went into the recording room, pumped it into a speaker, the line out of the snare, and put
Yep.
a snare over it between two chairs, so that whenever the snare would signal, it would actually create the snares. There wasn't enough snares sound
Yeah.
on, so we created it. So you
There's a
realize,
plug-in for that now.
there's a plug-in
Yeah.
for everything, man. There's a plug-in girlfriend now. There's a plug-in for making dinner. It's crazy. But then, it's like we get necessity was the mother of invention. In the
Yeah.
80s, when if you made a demo, if you made a song demo, the way you got a cut was it had to sound like a record. It had to
Yeah.
have we called them demos, song demos, but they were records.
Yeah.
So when Phil Collins, when You'd Padgham did the gated snare drum with, In the Air Tonight, that sound, it's like you had to figure out how to make that sound in your studio, whether it was your home studio. So what I did was I pumped the snare. I took a line out of the snare just from a drum machine, and I ran it the length of the basement. So one side is a speaker, and the other side is a microphone. So whatever it is, 50 feet across the basement.
Yeah.
And so you would get this, it would record the sound, and then I would put a gate on which would cut the signal off.
Yeah.
So you would time the amount of time that the snare was going. So if it was,
Yeah.
So that was the gated sound, or you would use white noise from a synthesizer, because your snare drum had to now sound like what the records on the radio sounded like.
100%.
So, yeah.
Mark, you were also, you talked a little bit about being you're super interested in sound and the tinkerer. I don't know if you remember, you were making power soaks before Tom Scholz put out the power soak.
Right.
And
yeah.
I bought one from you. It was in a black box, it was like an electrical conduit box.
There's a big resistor in it.
A giant resistor and the variable straps on it.
Yeah.
That's something I wish I still had. I'm an idiot. I don't even know what I did with it. And you were also the first guy that I knew that would like grinding up guitars and putting different pickups in and selection switches and all this stuff. And this may blow your mind. I'm not sure if you know I had this. But you either sold or traded a red 3-bolt Strat that was completely modified, had a L500 in the tail. It was a hardtail Strat, red 3-bolt with 3 little mini toggles on it. And you either sold it or traded it to Chiazzo Music and Freehold. And I went and traded my guitar for that guitar.
Wow,
it just had
bro.
so many different sounds. And if I could find that guitar again and it were in its state of glory, the thing played like absolute butter. I've got pictures of myself with it. It was unbelievable.
I was hoping
one of the guitars.
It was on your wall of fame behind you, man. I was hoping you were going to say,
I wish
remember
it were.
this?
Dude,
oh, man. I don't remember that guitar. Yeah, that's crazy, brother.
I remember it was a hardtail Strat, 70s, 3-bolt. And you remember Fender had what they called the micro tilt neck. So you loosen up the 3 bolts of the neck, and there was a little Allen screw, and you could change the sort of little pitch of the heel of the neck. Yeah. That guitar was unfreaking believable. Screamed. It was such a great guitar. But you had the 3 little the selectors and all this stuff, and it was like I was like, oh, that's when that guitar inspired me to start learning how to modify guitars. I was routing guitars, cutting Les Pauls, installing Floyd, screwing them up, Floyd's, Kahlers, making a double humbucker, triple pickup Les Paul. That was great. And I remember that Power Soak was on a Music Man amp that you had at the time.
I still have that amp. Still have it.
Come on. You do?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's
man. Do you use it?
I stopped using it probably in the early to mid 2000s. It still works. It still works. It was just, I don't know. I just, I think I started using this blackface Fender at that time. And I just kind of, but it's in the garage, man. If you ever want to, if you ever.
Oh man, that's so freaking cool. But that tone with the Power Soak and the Music Man and whatever whatever guitar you had, and maybe I think I might even seen you play with that red Strat somewhere, but it was unreal. So now I'm going to go back to you again. You're tinkering. You got the studio bug. You're at the record plant. Take me. Let's start walking through your career a little bit, and let's start talking about some of the big moments. I'd like to talk about when you really started developing as a writer too. So walk me through however you'd like to from there.
So essentially, I was at like 19 years old. The band that was recording at Record Plant, we were we made some demos on spec time. Spec time would mean that you would work for free on off hours. Like we'd go in on the weekend at midnight, or we'd go on in off hours, and when and if we secured a record deal, then we would pay our studio bill. So
Yeah.
it was a kind of a nice thing, that a perk that engineers and people that work in studios would get to develop acts, develop artists.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ron Orlando and Night Flyer never got signed, and I had an opportunity to join a cover band when I was 19. This band Bystander that you mentioned earlier, they were pretty popular at the Jersey Shore in North Jersey. And I started playing with, in fact, Joe Rayo he was leaving the band, and he called me. He said, "Do you want, are you interested in this gig? Because I'll get you an audition, And I said, "Yeah, nice. I might as well check it out." And
Lee Dietmeyer was in that band, right?
That's right. May he rest in peace. He just passed away a couple years ago.
Oh, he did not. No.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw what a bummer. He was.
I saw him at Light of Day about 2 years ago, and I hadn't seen him in 40 years. And man, he had a heart attack, and he passed. It's crazy, right?
What a bummer.
We're at that age where our friends are leaving, man. We gotta,
that stinks.
So we joined. Yeah, it does, man. He was there like at the in those formative crazy years,
Yeah, totally.
So I did the audition. I started working with those guys 5 days a week. It was like the first time I made any real money in the music business. It's like you're playing original music, you're not making money. If you get a cut, you get some songs on some records, then you start seeing some better change, and if you have a hit, then you make real money,
Yeah.
So I'm playing with Bystander for about a year, and I was really frustrated because when I joined, they were going to be working. They said, we're going to work we're going to rehearse one day all original music and one day all covers. And we're playing 5 or 6 days a week. And I realized that they were just really working on cover music, and the original thing wasn't as important as they said it was going to be. So after a year, I decided I needed to leave. And that's when I built, my parents let me build the recording studio. And I started writing feverishly, writing, recording, learning how to get sounds together. At that point, I had like a bunch of songs that I recorded, but I didn't have, I would send them to record companies or publishers. It was really hard to make any headway, and I lived in New Jersey. Everything was happening in the city. So I got called to do a recording session in 1982. This guy, Steve Scharf, who was a record producer, and he was producing the project. And we went and we made some demos with this woman, I forget her name, at Penny Lane Studios in New York. And Steve Scharf, who's still in the business now, he was telling me about his manager, this guy, Barry Bergman, and Barry was instrumental in getting Meatloaf signed and AC/DC, and he worked at E.B. Marc's Music, and how he trusted him and he's honest. And everyone I was meeting in the business seemed like they were going to rip me off. It was like it was like, how do you meet an honest person that really legitimately cares about developing you as an artist, as a writer,
Yeah.
So anyway, he's telling me all about Barry. Anyway, came the day of doing guitar solos on these 3 songs we're recording, and Steve invites Barry to the studio. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I get to meet Barry, Barry Bergman. So Barry comes up, and he walks in, and I'm in the middle of a solo on something, and fortunately, it was a good solo, whatever. And he was kind of, he was impressed, It's always good when things happen. You're not planning these. You can't plan these scenarios, Yeah. Anyway, so I meet Barry. We say hello. Anyway, Barry calls me the next day, and I was living at my parents' house. I was 20 or 21 years old. Barry Bergman's on the phone. I was like, oh. So he says, I was really so impressed with your guitar playing, and Steve tells me, you're an aspiring songwriter and you have some song demos. And he says, why don't you come up to my office at Marc's Music in the city? I said, great. So we make a plan. I go to his office. I bring my best songs on a cassette, to play for him. and we sit down. And the first thing he does is he was after he left Marc's Music, he after signing Meatloaf's publishing, he got a big job at UA. He was the vice president of United Artists Publishing. Right?
Okay.
So I met him just after he left United Artists, and he went out on his own as a manager and publisher. So we have this meeting. He plays me a couple of songwriter artists that he's working with. This guy Bob Halligan. So Bob, who went on to write, I think at that point he probably just got a cut with Judas Priest. I think his first cut was "Take These Chains," and he also wrote some "Heads Are Gonna Roll." And he had this other artist, this guy Rob Friedman, and he played me their music, and it's like, man, these guys are good, you know. Then he says, okay, let me hear your demo, you know. So I play him the songs. He goes, I hear a lot of potential here. He says, I suggest that you go back and write 10 new songs, and let's get together in a month. So he gave me like a challenge, you know. So I went home, I wrote 10 songs. He lived in Brooklyn, in Sheepshead Bay of all places. I go to his office in Brooklyn. I play him the 10 songs. He goes, there was one song. He says, this is really good. He says, I'm going to play this for some people in the business, you know. He says, keep writing, you know, come back in a month, you know, bring me more songs, you know. So eventually there was a couple of songs that he was shopping around, and there was, I don't know if you remember this guy, Alex Satkin. He produced the Thompson Twins record. Okay. And I wrote this song. He was producing, I don't know if it was Eddie Grant. It was like a reggae pop guy, and he loved one song. The song that I wrote was called "Hypnotized by Love," and he was going to cut it. And I said, "This is great. It was going to be my first cut." And Alex Satkin died like a couple months later. The guy died.
Holy
so I'm like,
cow.
you know, it's like this weird karmic introduction to the music business, you know. So anyway, Barry, but Barry was at this point he's going to get me a cut. He's going to, you know. Anyway, I don't know. 1985, I started writing more. You know, I always had like pop sensibilities growing up in Brooklyn, listening to WABC. I'm sure you did, Vic. It was the greatest. You know, it was the Renaissance on the radio. It was everything, man. It was James Brown. It was the Rolling Stones. It was Kansas. It was you know, it was Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. It was the Jackson 5. It was the pop music of the day. It was Chuck Mangione. Greatness and great melodies and hooks.
Yep.
You grew up with this, you know, this amazing, you know, amazing spectrum of every kind of music. So we're
lucky
very fortunate.
Bastards is what we are. We're lucky
Exactly.
bastards.
We're really lucky to grow up at that time.
Lucky bastards, man.
So Barry got me my first cut in 1985, a song I wrote called Step Into My Line of Fire. It was a hard rock song with a hook. And a lot of these hard rock bands, as you know, they had nothing but album cuts. And they needed people like me and you to come in and write radio songs that they could have hits with, you know.
Yep.
So this girl, it was the artist was Lee Aaron. She was out of Canada. She was the metal queen of Canada. And then on her next record, I had 2 songs, and one charted. It was in the top 10 on the Canadian charts. She was a big Canadian artist. Yep. And that sort of started things off. Then I got some cuts with this band, Helix.
I remember the Helix stuff. I love that.
Oh, thanks, brother. Yeah.
I remember when that happened, man. That was really cool.
Yeah, it was sort of like, and Tony Bon Jovi was the executive producer on the record, and I ended up producing with them. So it was sort of my introduction to, you know, I was producing all along, but it's like producing records in the business, you know.
Yeah.
By the way,
and for those who don't know, but for those who don't know, Tony Bon Jovi is John Bon Jovi's cousin, who owned the power station where John, if you watch any of the recent documentary stuff, and he talks about growing up sweeping floors at the power station, there's the connection, right? That's what Tony owned the power station.
That's right. And John was a gopher. John basically was trying to get into the music business, just like when I was a kid going to Record Plant. And I started working at Record Plant because I wanted to get in the business. I figured that's a good route, you know. You know, by being an engineer or being an assistant. So I asked my friend Paul. I'm going back a few years, but
yeah,
I said, Paul, you know, can I come work? You know, is there any work for me at the Record Plant? He says, yeah, he says, just come up, we'll have a meeting with Roy, the owner. And so, I went up and Roy says, yeah, man, we'll find some stuff for you to do around here. So as it turned out, for a month, I was soldering patch bays on the record plant truck. So that was like the mobile unit that recorded all these concerts. And after a month of that, and I would have graduated to other things, but I was like,
Yeah.
I got to be playing, man. I got to be writing. This hiding in a truck is not for me, So it was a interesting, short-lived run working at record plant. But anyway, that's how it started, man. Barry got me my first cut, and we'd gotten about 30 or 40 cuts together, and we had some things on the charts here and Canada, and a few bands overseas, and that was my introduction into songwriting and production in the business, in the real business.
It's a tough business, man, and the fact that you've, first of all, I had some cuts, right, and I exited the music business in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
Maybe more toward the late '90s. I had a recording studio in Westfield for a little while, and was producing unsigned bands and doing some stuff. And I was really proud of that work. But I got married. We chose to have a baby. My daughter's born, and I'm in a spot where, like, hey, for me, and I tell people all the time, I'd still be sleeping on the couch in the studio, waiting for the big hit. I used to use this guy up at a studio called Big Blue Meanie out of Jersey City. Tim Gillis. Tim was a great dude. He was a really good engineer, but I used to use him for mastering. And we would always sit and chat. He was a real great engineer. And he said to me, Vic, I just hope for some luck. I go, well, what do you mean by luck? Tell me exactly. He goes, I just want to be the lucky son of a bitch who's turning the dials when the next Dark Side of the Moon is being recorded. And you just never know when that's coming your way. And he said, so I keep recording bands and I keep trying to find the greatest projects. He goes, but a lot of that, like once I'm done, that like turning it into Dark Side of the Moon, that's out of my hands. Like I try to create Dark Side of the Moon so it can have that sort of longevity and that impact. But it was, and so I was in a car with a friend of mine and I was moving into technology and I was starting to do well. But I had some regrets about, not being in the business of music anymore. And he said, what are you regretting? I said, I just feel like I was a failure. And he looked at me. This guy named Sam Regier, by the way, great guy. He looked at me and said, are you out of your freaking mind? I go, what are you talking about? He goes, how hard what you guys do is. And the fact that you had any success at all, you're like in the 0.5% of people out there just to even think about music. Yeah. He goes, nobody looks at you as unsuccessful. At all.
Absolutely, Bella.
And he goes, it's a rough business. And so, Mark, the 30 some odd cuts, the life in music, I mean, you're an incredible dude, man. I mean, and the fact that you're committed and what people don't know about you and what they're really learning here about, your history and your passion from the musician to the tinkerer to the producer and sound creator. You're a freaking amazing guitar player. I mean, a hell of a musician. And I'm going to encourage people here to look you up in other means. And you'll tell us where we can find your stuff more than just a Google search. Because, I mean, shit, when I was in high school, you were the guy. You were the guy around the corner. You were the guy with the tasty riffs. You're the guy who's still out there doing it. And I want to get to sort of do the walk here over the next 10 minutes to sort of big gigs you've had and stuff. But for the listeners, you'll go out and you'll look up Mark a little bit more deeply after this, and you'll find that the talent runs deep. Mark, so you come out of the recording, you got all these cuts, right? What'd you do after that? When the cuts started coming down, and we talked a little bit about grunge and sort of the turn we took there.
Yeah, really. So I'd written my friend Arthur Payson. Arthur's an engineer in the business. He was Desmond Child's engineer for many years.
Okay.
And I get a call I knew Arthur. He was friends with myself and Barry. And Arthur is producing this guy, Mitch Malloy, he just got signed to RCA Records. So, and they want me to meet with Mitch, and he needs some songs. He needs songs. So we get together. So the day we get together, we realized that, he played after I left Bystander, he joined Bystander. So there was all these weird kind of and he's from North Dakota, but we met in Jersey at his house in Jersey. So we wrote a song. I remember I was driving up. I had the title in my head. Nobody wins in this war. We record the song. We write the song, and we make a quick demo. We send it to the label, which in those days there was no email.
Yeah.
We made a DAT of the song.
Yeah.
A DAT of the demo, and FedExed it to Rick Aliberti, who was the head of A&R at RCA Records, and he listened to it the next day, I guess, or 2 days later. And he calls me up, and Rick calls me and he goes, "This is fucking great. You guys wrote this great song." He says, "You guys got to keep writing. Just keep writing." So we wrote 6 songs, 5 of them, like with the Alice Cooper. We had 5 songs on the record. Flying up. 3 of the songs are in the 20s on the charts. First one made it to whatever 24, then 25 on the pop chart, on the CHR Top 100, Hot 100, and like we were saying, then it still smells like Teen Spirit.
Smells like the end of my career.
It smells like this shit is over, man. It doesn't smell like shit. It smells like this shit is over.
Yeah, and
so,
it's funny. I don't know if you had the same feeling, but. So all of a sudden, like that curveball comes, right? And it comes from the outside in, and you're like, okay. I was thinking at that time that I had a very big decision to make. One was to move to Nashville.
Right.
Because back in that day, songwriters, there were many of them still.
Yeah, man.
Right. It was still
that was the beginning of the new Nashville thing, like the new country thing, like Achy Breaky Heart was a hit, and
so moved to Nashville.
Yeah.
I had never really at the time even contemplated moving away from my family, nor did my wife. Number 2 was to double down on production versus writing, open a recording studio.
Yeah.
Gear was becoming less expensive, more accessible. The ADATs were out. I could have 24 tracks of ADAT, buy, an 8-bus console, like outboard gear was starting to become a little bit more reasonable. Or I could split, right? I could sort of reinvent myself. And I went the recording studio route. I decided to open up. I opened this place in Westfield, New Jersey, took almost every nickel and then some that we had left. I had just gotten married, and I went up and I gave it a run there. It was tough, and if I could do it all over again, I would have picked and choose the sessions that I personally recorded, and I would have doubled down on the talent and not the hourly rate. I was trying to keep the lights on too, man,
Right,
and
man,
I had to rent the studio, I had to rent across the street, my wife's work, and all this stuff's going on. But what you don't really realize at the time is that when you're the chief, the cook, and the bottle washer, you can't do all 3 of those things great. Something's going to sacrifice.
Something's going to suffer, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, the best thing that I did a lot of great things out of the studio, but one of the things I'm most proud of that came out of that was when I realized that I got to make myself available. I had a buddy in the music business who called me one day and he said, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" I said, "I got a session tonight. Band's been in here for multiple days." And he said, "I need a huge favor." He goes, there's this band on RCA called Babe the Blue Ox, and they're doing a live gig at this club in New York, and the club has 24-track studio in the basement. And the A&R guy, a guy named Peter Robinson, wants to record the band live because he wants to get
He's
demos.
one of my best friends, by the way, Pete Robinson.
You got to be kidding me. Oh, my God, what a small world.
Yeah.
So Pete, so I go down there, and I'm like, I call the guys, I reschedule the gig. There was no problem. It was an overdub night, and I told them, that I had an opportunity to record a label act in the city. So I went to his club. I went to the basement. Dude, we did like a 25-minute sound check. I got drunk, and the only thing I kept telling myself is record everything, get a sound, put the mics in the right place, record everything flat.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea what the room sounded like I was in, what what was going to, and then the goal was we were going to go back to my studio. It was an ADAT studio at the club. Yeah. I was going to take the tapes, was going to pop it in. We were going to come back, and they only wanted it for pre-production. So we come back, and at the time, Sorry, it was a mix night. It wasn't a record night that I had postponed. I had racks and racks of rental gear in the studio that we were renting to mix
For
this
this
band
band.
that I was doing, right? Um, and forget the name of the rental company, but the guy who owned it was a guy named Jim Flynn. And so I had these racks of gear. And so I said, hey, if you guys can come to the studio quick, we can fix up a couple of things. We'll spend one day. We're not going to make it perfect. And I could mix the shit out of it. I got, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars worth of outboard gear here. Really mix this is going to be great. So there was a 3-piece band, two women, like uber feminist, and a guy, and Pete comes out and we're doing the overdubs. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why the feminism thing is funny. They really were aggressive people. And so we do all the overdubs and get it all done. And Pete's like, dude, this sounds better than their last record. Like, because I had sort of I got sounds on it before they showed up for overdubs.
Man, you set it up. You set up.
So when they came in, they're like, what the frick? This is unbelievable. And we caught the band. So Pete's like, let's go to dinner. And so I don't know, somehow we're talking and it's me, their manager, and Pete, and the 3 people from the band. And just how we loved each other. Like, we got along real quickly, real good.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned some woman's name. And, in the music business, we'll have this sick humor. And I said, oh, she's so hot. And I said, I'm going to chop her up and put her in the trunk of my car. It's like something really of course, I'm never going to do that. But, she's so hot, I'm going to make her mine forever in a serial killer way. Of course, people listening, I would never, ever do that.
No.
But Pete looked at me like, you're about to get slayed by these ladies. He was like, because to him, he thought that would be the most offensive thing you could say. Yeah. So he puts on the brakes like, oh, shit. And they look at each other and they go, bah! They start dying. Like, they got the joke, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh my God, I thought the relationship was over. They love you even more. Well, anyway, that project, Mark, came out so great. They released it to radio. He's like, we're releasing this as an EP. It was 8 songs.
From the live thing.
This is better than the last record.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable. And I was going to get a chance to produce the next record, and it got dropped.
Man, this is
Pete left, and they got dropped.
This is that exact moment that grunge came in, right?
This was shortly thereafter. But grunge, I mean, listen, Pearl Jam was as big as they can be, and Nirvana was massive, and STP was out. But that's funny. I didn't know you were really good friends with Pete. What's he doing these days?
Pete's been in Nashville for many years. He's married. He has a beautiful home. He was working. I forget the name of the publisher, but he had a couple artists, that were making some noise down there.
Great.
And whenever I'm in Nashville, I stay at Pete's house. He's
that's cool.
My brother. He's a Pisces like you.
Ah, nice.
When's
his birthday? Right? I am March 17th.
Pete is March 5th.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember that you were Pisces. I don't know why that flew into my head.
That's too funny.
So right at that time, the time that grunge came in, I don't know if you remember the band Alias. They were Sheriff, When I'm With You.
Yep.
I had 2 songs coming out that was going to be out on the new Alias record. They were one of the big acts at the label. And it's like grunge came in, man. They never put out that record. They put out that record in 2017. That's how hard the fucking grunge thing changed the landscape. It completely, So anyway, when that happened, I also had a development deal at RCA Records as an artist. Rick Aliberti, after I wrote the songs with Mitch Malloy, he wanted to hear my songs, and he said, what are you doing, man? I go, well, I've been an artist, for many years. I'm a songwriter. He goes, well, play me a song. I played him a song. I played him one song. He says, do you want a development deal?
Nice.
I said, well, let's have Barry come in. I had my manager, and we went in, and we go in, and Rick is like, he just wanted it to happen, man. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you I'm going to write you a check for $25,000. Go make some demos. Now, and this is 1991.
Yeah.
It's like no one's ever given me $25,000 in those days. So I'm like, so how's that sound to you? I look at Barry. Barry goes, I think that's acceptable. All my friends that were getting development deals, they were getting $5,000 to go make some demos,
Yeah.
at the labels.
Yep.
So I bought a good mic, and I just, I spent, a few weeks recording the songs. I turned them in, and they had 6 months to make a decision. And this is the other thing, man. Grunge came in. BMG bought RCA Records.
Yep.
Purchased RCA Records. They dropped 40 of their signed acts, and they dropped all of the development acts, which was me.
Yeah.
So it was like, man.
And they're published writers. I was
Right.
on BMG.
That's
I
crazy.
had a publishing deal on BMG, and I got nuked.
Unbelievable, right, man?
Yeah.
It's just
we
literally got nuked, then we had to decide, like, and we both made different decisions in our life, but it's like, I didn't really think of the plan B, but the good thing was the RCA thing really got me focused on my artist thing, writing for myself, because I was always writing for other people, and I was starting to find my voice of, who I was as an artist. And then, I started doing that for a bunch of years, and then being in all the years in the business caught up to me, man. And 1997, I was living in Manhattan, and I was just telling a friend the story today. And I was playing at the South Street Seaport. I mean, literally, I went from having really nice checks, from ASCAP and publishing checks and checks from the label.
Yep.
I was making a living as a songwriter, and then when grunge came in, it's like, what? It changed everything, man. So I was playing as a busker at the South Street Seaport. And one day I'm walking back from the gig and I have a stomach ache. And anyway, long story short, without all the graphic details, my Achilles heel was my colon, and I developed ulcerative colitis,
Oh, man.
So I spent the next couple of years trying to get a handle on it. And, I spent 4 months in the hospital, and the surgeon saved my life. Thank God.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I went down to 110 pounds. I'm 6 feet, I mean, I looked like I just walked out of a concentration camp,
Holy cow.
And, thank God I found the right surgeon. I got healthy, and then it's 2000, and at this point it's 2001, 2002. It's like, okay, I got a new lease on life, man. What am I going to do? So I continued writing producing my own music. And, I started doing like a local, in the 2010s, this thing at the Supper Club in Asbury Park. We would do it Tuesday night. McLuhan's, exactly.
Yeah.
We would do that every week. Superstorm Sandy happened.
Yep.
We did some benefit shows, which is when I met Gordon. And actually, at my Superstorm Sandy show, Gordon Brown, I asked Gordon to join us, and this girl, Reagan Richards.
Yeah, his partner, co-writer. Yeah,
right.
She's awesome.
So at that show, that was the day they met. They
Amazing.
They just bonded, man. Like, we had like an after show hang, and those two just sat at a table planning their future. It was really
unbelievable,
kind of a beautiful thing,
So cool.
So anyway, man, I just, and as you know, in the early 2000s, we had to reinvent the way we made money in the business. One day I was writing we were writing for an artist. I think we were writing a song for Shakira. My friend Marcus played in her band, and he said, "Do you want to write a song with me for her?" So we're writing, and he gets a call from a jingle house. This guy Tony Verderosa, and they're looking for it's a new Diet Coke commercial. He says, "Well, we can get back to the song. Do you want to write the demo with me? You want to write the spot?" So we're in my studio. I said, "Yeah, why not, man?" So we write this thing, we send it in. Tony loves it. He goes, "Man, where'd you record this?" I said, "Well, we did it in my studio." He goes, "I love this, man." He says, he turned it in, to see if it could win the ad, win the spot. It didn't, but he started calling me, for spots, for jingles, which in a million years I never aspired to doing jingles. It never entered my mind. So about a few months later, he says they're doing this HIV STD awareness commercial for Trojan condoms. So I'm like, Trojan condoms. I'm thinking, Trojan man.
Yeah.
But it had this depth and consciousness to it,
Okay.
He sends me the picture. It's a 30-second picture. It's this couple's, it opens up a black screen. It says, no, I'm sorry. It opens up the couple's holding hands on the couch, and they're just, sort of like in this, romantic sort of, space. And the screen goes black, and it says one out of every 4 people with HIV doesn't tell their partner. So I'm
Wow.
like, I was completely moved by this 30-second, picture. There was no music or anything. So I wrote this song for it, because I'm a songwriter. So I'm not going to write a jingle for a condom,
Yeah.
So I wrote a song, sort of an emotional pop song, and he sent it in, and they loved it immediately. And, we spent like 6 weeks. They were trying to, make it. Can we do it in a minor key? The ad agencies are crazy. They're all scared of losing their jobs. So they try
Yeah.
every possible thing. Even though they think they have the perfect thing, they have to try to make it into something else. So after 6 weeks of crazy stress, it's like, I don't even know if I even want to be in this business. They say, we want to go in the studio with you, see if we could experiment. Anyway, after 6 weeks, it comes back to what it originally was,
Sure.
We tried all these things. And it went on the air. It was on the air for 2 years. And as soon as it went on the air, I started getting emails. People would find my website. We love this song. Where can we get this song? Now, I was like, I just had, half a song, really. I wrote a verse and a chorus,
Okay.
I said, all these people, like literally thousands of emails.
Wow.
This was like 2006. It was before social media was really what it is today. I think I just joined Facebook then.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I got to make a record. So I named the record. The song was called This Life, and I finished the record. And it took like a year, to come out. Actually for that time we sold about 20,000 copies, which is a lot of records.
Yeah.
Sell by yourself,
Yeah, for an independent, definitely.
So it's like, okay, man, I'm doing the right thing. Even though, I need to express myself, so I need to write songs. If someone's purchasing it or you're getting the acknowledgement, that's inspiring. But, it's like, I need to do this, so it's like, okay, great. So now I can actually make a living doing what I love, being an artist.
I'm going to test my memory here for a second. And I can picture the cover of that record. Were you leaning up against the wall with a guitar in your hand and one foot up against the wall?
Yeah, I think so, man. This Life. Yeah. It was in Asbury Park.
I'm gonna look it up after the show, but I think I nailed it.
Oh,
I do.
I think you did.
I do remember that.
That's great, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told you I've been paying attention.
You are, brother. You are. I missed you, Vic. It's been.
You too, man. This is awesome.
It's like no time went by, man.
I know. This is what's great about when you have a kindred spirit.
That's right. Yeah, kindred spirits, man.
So you go from the Jingle House. And I want to, what people don't, what they're going to know from the intro, but what they don't know right now is that you're a musical director.
Yeah.
So once you, there's probably a lot in between all of that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to get to that and, unpack that for a little bit. Because I'm sure that experience has just been incredible.
It's been, it's been a mind-blowing experience. The funny thing is, Vic, when I was a kid, it's interesting that kind of came around so many years later. But when I was a kid, I used to dream about the band I was going to put together, and I would always think about what needed to be done to facilitate a rehearsal. And like, I remember the first time we got a keyboard player in our band. And I remember the girl's name. Her name was Frida Cox.
Okay,
and she was from Howell, and we had a piano in my parents' family room.
Okay.
It's a colonial house,
Yeah.
in the family room. And we played music in the basement. So it's like, this is how my mind works. It's like, we have a piano player and we have to rehearse in the basement. So I was always like, I got to make this happen. So literally I moved the piano by myself, an upright piano. I moved it in through the garage, into the backyard, down the trap door, and got the piano by myself because I was so determined to have a piano player in the band. I was like 15 years old. That's fucking nuts, right?
People do not try this at home.
No, man, no. I'm lucky I didn't kill myself or or my little sister. Anyway, so I think back, it's like we would do shows, we put on a concert at the Jackson Cinema, and I was always thinking about, it's like I got to organize the band, I got to make sure everyone's rehearsed, they know what they learn, what parts they need to focus on, designing a show. So anyway, go ahead, 40 years, whatever it is, and the years, as you know, being a producer, you're working with artists, you're working with budgets,
Yeah.
you're finding who you think are the best of the best musicians in any given area. So if you do a session, if you're hiring a drummer, you don't just want a great drummer. You want a great drummer that is an expert at the type of song you're recording. If you're recording a rock tune or a soul tune, you want the guy that plays the shit the best. And by the way, you want the guy or the girl that comes with the least amount of drama. So it's like you want great people, great at what they do, that understand, they know how to read the room, they know how to stay in their lane, they know how to support the song and the project and the singer. So for years, being a producer and doing that, I didn't realize, but I was developing my musical director skills, And then, then you come to 2012, and I started doing the residency at McLuhan Supper Club. And every week we would do some original music, and we would have a musical theme, like a classic rock tribute, whether it would be, the whole night would be, for example, Allman Brothers, or Jimi Hendrix and Cream, or Yes and Jethro Tull, or an Asbury Park night, or Beatles, or whatever it was. And it's like, okay, I got to call. I called my friends that were the right people for the gig, and it became a very popular night. Like we would pack the room every Tuesday night for 3.5 years.
Did you have the same players per theme, or did you have different players per theme?
There were guys that were at a lot of the gigs. Like my friend Arna Wendt, keyboardist, local keyboardist.
I'd like to meet Arna someday. He's another guy that I've seen playing with everybody.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
he's just not a guy. He's not a guy I've ever met. So
yeah.
I've seen him great. Much stuff.
We just did a show together over the weekend. We did a Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young tribute, which was fun. So Arna, and then I got like my New York guys like Rich Mercurio and Andy Burton, who's from North Jersey. Andy was with John Mayer, and these guys are they're great touring musicians, and they're great studio musicians, and they're great learners.
Yeah.
So there was very little time for rehearsal. Literally, I would give everyone the song list, which usually about 20 songs. On the Tuesday afternoon at 3:00, we would load into McLuhan's. We would do a quick sound check, and that would be our rehearsal for the night show.
Okay.
So it was battle conditions every Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's like, and it was very rare that things were really loose. Like people did their homework. They really cared about it, So we do these shows, and this is going on. And then, I don't know, somehow, my friend Sammy Boyd. Sammy, who used to book Bystander.
I remember Sammy.
You remember, he was one of the big booking agents in the 70s and 80s. Yep. May he rest in peace. Sammy passed away a couple of years ago also.
Okay. Wow.
He booked Bystander.
Mark, I'm getting a little nervous. Everybody we talk about has passed away. You and I have to stick around for a while.
Brother, we got to stick around. We got a lot of work to do, Vic.
Big time.
We do, man. We got to keep people inspired. Got to spread the love.
100%.
So Sammy would come to all my shows, a lot of my shows on Tuesdays, and we kind of reconnected. And then one night it's interesting, he brought Darlene Love to a show.
Okay.
And I knew who Darlene was, of course.
Yeah, sure.
She sang on, all the, she was an artist, one of Phil Spector's artists. She sang on all those records, all those, Phil Spector hits.
Yeah.
The Crystals, she sang on Basketball Jones, you realize like this is like she was part of the sonic landscape of the soundscape of our youth,
An icon.
So I met Darlene, and we just hit it off. We hit it off, and then I didn't see her for a year or so, and I get a call to play from Stevie Van Zant's assistant. I get the call to play on the last song recorded for the Stevie Van Zant's recording, Darlene Love's.
I remember that. Yep.
And the album's called Introducing Darlene Love, because Phil Spector kept her under his thumb, and he didn't allow her to be the fully expressed artist that she deserved to be. In fact, he told Darlene, he called Darlene and told her, "You're going to sing River Deep, Mountain High. This is your song." Darlene comes to the session, and Tina Turner is singing the song, and Darlene is just being hired to sing backgrounds.
Wow.
This is like, Anyway, so Stevie's producing the record. My buddy Rich Mercurio and Lee Nadell, great bass player, they played on a bunch of tracks on the album, and they were trying to get me on the record, but they were using like the engineer's friend. Anyway, I get this call. I go in the studio. Stevie's there, and I never met Stevie, but we grew up in the same environment. We grew up in Asbury Park playing. We knew all of the same people. Kevin Cavanaugh, who was his keyboard player with Southside Johnny.
Yep.
Kevin had just passed. May he rest in peace. And we connected, and he was doing we recorded a Bruce Springsteen song called Night Closing In, and Stevie he says, we're doing it was really a Phil Spector production of this song, big wall of sound production.
Yep.
So after we got the basic track, he sent the rhythm section home, and he says, "Mark, I need you to play, bolero guitar, bolero 12 string. So you're playing this guitar part, and then and everything was retracked 4 times. So the bolero thing is so he's giving me these parts. He's saying, okay, so everything was tracked, and it's like Stevie has Richie play drum fills, so it's 7 minutes. The song's 7 minutes.
Okay.
And it's this really stiff acoustic 12-string guitar. My hand's fucking cramping up. Anyway, anything Stevie asked me to play, I could play, and we just fucking hit it off, man. And he was like kindred spirit, Anyway, I go home from the session. 6 months later, Stevie's assistant calls, Paul Asmolskis. He says, "Stevie wants you to come and we're doing the album release for Darlene's record. So we're going to do a show at the Paramount in Asbury, and then we're going to do 2 shows at the Whiskey in LA. So I said, great. So I'm on my way to the first rehearsal. Stevie calls me, he goes, "I'm not crazy about Darlene's band." He says, I want you to go in, see what's going on, be low key and report back to me, So I go in.
Was it Stevie or Silvio who called you?
Well, probably at some point in the conversation he was Stevie, and he may have shifted into Silvio. Stevie has several personalities that he could summon at any moment.
It's fantastic.
He's the most generous person I've ever met. Empathetic, and you don't want to fuck with him and get on his bad side, because he is Silvio, and he also is Gandhi.
Love it.
He's an amazing soul. So anyway, it's like, okay, Stevie Van Zandt's calling me. All right, so I go in, I call him after the session. I go, "The guitar player and bass player suck. They're just, there's no way that they should be playing this music. They're incapable of comprehending what this music is, Anyway, he says, "Okay, well, let's make nice for now, So we do the show at the Paramount. I think I called the drummer. We got the right drummer, which helped a lot. So we do this show. It was probably a 50 or 60 piece band. It's full brass, like orchestral brass, strings. There's a string section. There's an orchestral percussion section with timpani. There was a 30 piece gospel choir, and Stevie is all about production, the way things look on stage, So we set up for sound check, and we're doing a run through of the show, 22 song set. Stevie gets the sound check, and this is, I don't know, 3 hours before the show is happening. And Stevie says, "Let's close the curtain so we could see how the reveal looks." Close the curtain? The curtain's not closing. It's like, everything's the curtain is immovable because of the setup. Stevie has them break down. This is hours before the show.
Wow.
Move everything. This is unacceptable. Move everything. These curtains have to close. So anyway, so we did this reveal. I mean, it was like the Wizard of Oz, you know?
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
like there's all these levels of, here's the brass, here's the strings, here's the timpani. Under that here's the drummer.
Yeah.
It was like this huge, production. Anyway, the reveal, I mean, I wish I could have seen the reveal, Anyway, so I realized, man, Stevie, it's not just the music, man. It's like the show, it's really the show. Same thing.
360 degrees, right? 360
Exactly.
degrees is a lot to the entire
Everything, man.
experience.
That's
yeah,
right,
I
buddy.
love it.
Every level. So as much as, I've known from, touring and being, on the road and in studio, and I learned so much from Stevie about, about show production, Anyway, so we do the show there. Then we go to LA to do the 2 shows at the Whiskey. So the first day we get picked up at the airport, and Darlene's son, Sean, he owns a limo service. He picks the band up.
Okay.
And the guitar player, I'm in the car, in the van with the guitar player and bass player, that these guys are not happening. Anyway, the guitar player starts talking shit about Stevie Van Zandt, not knowing that Darlene's son is the chauffeur. Now, to Darlene, Stevie Van Zandt is the Messiah.
Yeah, of course.
At 73 years old, he gets her signed to Sony Records. Unheard of. Full-blown record deal in 2015, which is unheard of, 14, whatever it was. Anyway, Sean reported back to Darlene that the guitar player is talking shit about Stevie. Darlene fires. This is the day before the show at the Whiskey. She fires the bass player and guitar player. So I call Mike Merritt. Mike Merritt was the bass player on the Conan show. So he was, and we had La Bamba, we had the Southside, the Jukes horns, they did the show. 22-piece band at the Whiskey. Have you ever been to the Whiskey?
Yes.
It's small, man. It's like we had 22 people on that stage,
Yep.
Insane, right? So we do the shows. And that weekend, Stevie said, "You're going to be Darlene's musical director. I need you to protect my arrangements. I want you're going to make sure that Darlene's protected, that things go right here." So great. I'm serving Stevie Van Zandt. This guy I respect. He's,
Yeah.
So we did her Christmas tour. We did a bunch of TV. Darlene, my first show after that, Darlene says, "You're going to be singing that Elvis Costello duet with me, right?" And I'm like, "I am?" "Yes, I am."
Yeah.
So I had to go. So Elvis wrote this song. What's it called? Too Soon to Know.
One of my favorite artists, by the way.
Oh, me too, man. I love Elvis. Oh, by the way, we do the Colbert Show with Darlene and Stevie, right?
Okay.
So I'm driving to the Ed Sullivan Theater. Stevie calls. He goes, "Do me a favor, when you get there, go down to Elvis's dressing room and show him the song." I go, "Show him the song?" "Yeah, I changed his song a little bit." So Elvis had 2 songs on the record.
Okay.
It was the first single. Forbidden Nights. So I go down to Elvis's dressing room. I said, "Elvis," Stevie said, "we should just review the song we're going to be playing on the show tonight," because Elvis agreed to join us, for the performance with John Baptiste's band and Stevie. And so I go in, and it's like I'm fucking showing Elvis his fucking song,
Yeah, it's crazy.
He goes, so I start playing. He goes, "This is my song?" I go, "Yeah." I said, Stevie changed it a bit, He said, "Man, I wrote this as like a cowboy. It was sort of like a country. It was this cowboy song, and Stevie made it like a Phil Spector, this big arrangement, Anyway, I show him the song. We go on the show, and Elvis says, "I'm not going to plug my guitar in." He says, so Elvis faked the whole thing. He just his guitar wasn't plugged in. It was wonderful, but he was beautiful, man. He was such a great sport,
That's cool.
So we did that, and then the first show, which was the following week, he says, Darlene says, "You got to do this duet with me tonight." So I had to go learn the song. Fortunately, there was a teleprompter.
Yeah.
And I'm singing duets on this whole tour with Darlene Love, like one of the greatest singers. And, so it was
How many shows did you do?
Her Christmas tour was probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 shows. She works a
Oh,
lot. That's her season.
it's
Um,
great.
late mid-November until the end of January. Probably, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 shows, I guess it was total the first year.
Are you guys still doing that?
Well, no. So then what happens is I'm with Darlene. This is 2015. Into 2016, I do her tours, any shows she had. I was her MD. I was her musical
Yeah.
director. In September of 2016, Stevie calls me and he goes, "I just got a call from this guy Leo Green. We're doing a show at the O2 in London. It's the London Blues Festival, and I need you to put a band together. It's one show, you know." So I call Rich Mercurio. Forget who I called for bass. I called Jack Daly for bass. So
Okay.
Jack's with Lenny Kravitz for 15 years. Jack's one of
Yeah,
my
Jack's
favorite bass
great.
players. Great guy.
He's great.
Jack. I call Andy Burton, great keyboardist. Cliff Carter, James Taylor, great pianist. Put the band together. We rehearse the rhythm section, horn section, and girls. We rehearse for 2 weeks at Stevie's studio. And then we go to England. Me and Eddie Mannion fly to England to meet three singers that did not rehearse with us for 2 weeks. That Leo Green got the singers because we had to save money. We needed
Yeah.
locals. Three singers. I sent them all their parts. I recorded all their parts, sent them their parts. Eddie had charts for the horns. So we fly to England like probably 5 days before the show, not knowing, we know what the rhythm section is, but we have no
Yeah.
idea who these people are. I go into rehearse with the girls. They knew the songs like they'd been singing them for a year. I was
That's
blowing
great.
22 songs, all the background parts. A couple
Unbelievable.
tweaks here and there.
Yeah.
The horns that Leo got for Eddie were like the best cats in England. They were Van Morrison's guys. They were the big show guys and everything. And we did the show and it went unbelievable. Sold out room, great night. And in the middle of rehearsal, Stevie goes, "Man, these songs, this is sounding like a record to me, So we go back to New York. So the show was October 29th, 2016. We go back to New York, and he says, "We're going to go in the studio on November 9th." So I'm going, wow, that's the day after the election. So we get in the studio, not to get into politics or anything,
Yeah.
but the person that won was the other guy that we were praying would not win. And, and New York City was like a funeral home.
Yeah.
It was so, you could feel the sadness and you could feel this depression and this angst and because everyone in New York knows who this person is because a lot of them have done business with him.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to mention his name, because we're
Well,
not
you
talking
already
about.
did, but
We're not
that's
going to.
okay.
I didn't say his name. I said who he was.
Believe
Anyway,
me.
we channel all of our energy. Hey man, God bless everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So we channel all of our energy into this record, Soulfire. We record the song that day. We record the rest of the record the next couple of weeks, and then Stevie says, "Yeah, we're going to do a tour. We're going to go out in April. We'll do a show at the Count Basie Theater. We did a show at the Asbury Park Music Festival." So I called Richie to come play drums. Richie was he plays with Adina Menzel, and he was going out with her. So I called my brother Charlie Drayton. You know who Charlie is?
I don't know who Charlie is.
Charlie was him and Steve Jordan. That was the rhythm section for the Expensive Winos.
Okay.
Charlie and Steve would switch off on bass and drums. So Charlie, who I met a bunch of years earlier, Charlie's one of the best drummers on the planet. One of the most unique. His wife was Chrissy from the Vinyls. So
okay.
Charlie played on Touch Myself, the big hit.
Of course.
Fiona Apple, he produced that big Fiona Apple record.
Yep.
Charlie's been in the business since he was a kid. His dad was a big jingle guy in the 60s and 70s. So Charlie grew up in the studio with Steve Gadd. When he was 6 years old, it's like Gadd and
Say no more.
Hugh McCracken. I mean, he grew up in that scene. So, and he absorbed it all. He's a sponge, soul sponge.
I was in what was the studio called? The House of Music.
House
in
music,
West
yeah,
Orange. I don't know if you remember that,
of
when
course.
Gadd and McCracken were playing on Art Garfield's record.
Art Garfunkel.
And
Yeah,
yeah, Art Garfunkel, rather.
yeah,
Sorry, yeah,
yeah,
Art
yeah.
Garfunkel, yeah. And he was not a nice guy, but they were all. That's another
Steve,
podcast. It's all.
Steve, what you saying? Steve wasn't, or
No,
Art,
Garfunkel,
Art. Oh my
Garfunkel.
God!
No, he
Oh,
was he was not a he was
let's not
not a
even.
nice
I
man to
know.
people around him. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
Mark, here's what I want to do.
yeah,
I'm going to definitely have to have you back because we got a lot more to talk about. But
yeah,
I want to
brother.
make sure the listeners don't get pulled into a 3-hour podcast. So
Yeah,
right now, you're musical director for Stevie Van Zandt and the Disciples of Soul, right?
that's right. Yeah.
How often do you guys go out on tour?
Well, unfortunately, we haven't been on tour since 19. We did our last show at the Beacon Theater in November of 19.
Okay.
Then COVID happened,
Yeah.
and the last time we played together was so I got called to do the American Music Honors, which is this Springsteen thing. So last year was the
Yeah.
inaugural. So Stevie, he called me to, quick, long story short, to do some songs for his documentary that's coming out in a couple weeks on HBO.
Very cool.
We need to record some music. Anyway, that turned into 2 shows at the Count Basie Theater,
That's great.
2 nights of 28 songs, which we hadn't played in 5 years.
Okay.
And so anyway, that was the last time we played, was last April at the Count Basie. But after, he finishes up with Bruce, there's a good chance we'll do some more stuff,
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, brother.
Mark, we have many more lives and much more ahead of us. And I tell people now, I still got a lot of tread on the tires. And man, you sound like you just changed yours and you're ready to burn some rubber.
Yeah, brother. We need to. Yeah, we'll pick up where we left off, man.
We will definitely pick up where we left
off. It's getting
off.
really good now. It's getting really good.
It's getting great. We're going to do a part 2 of this, so we'll stay in touch to schedule it sooner than later.
Great, brother. Great.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the past hour and a half. It's been unbelievable catching up.
Yeah,
I've
brother.
always been a fan. You're a great soul, a great dude. I'm glad the audience got to know a little bit about you. There's a lot more to talk about. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
So great reconnecting, brother. It's been way too long. You
too, man. Talk soon.
Yeah, man.
Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning into the show. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, the Podcast Index, and Podcasting 2.0. We'd really appreciate if you download Fountain, find us there, and support us via Value for Value. We hope you enjoy the show. Happy listening.